the first thing I wanted to talk about is this bizarre answer that JD Vance gave to a woman at an event he was doing last week. And here's the premise for what happened. JD Vance was doing an event for, I think, Turning Point USA. This is the Charlie Kirk group. And I think the premise here was he's going to go to the University of Mississippi. He's going to do a Q&A. People, anybody is allowed to get in line and ask him a question, and he's going to have a meaningful chat/debate with you about it. Anyway, there was a woman who asked a question that, honestly, there were a lot of parts to it. She asked a very long question, but she was criticizing him for some of the things he's said and done with regards to immigration. But there was one element of her question that was really interesting because of how JD Vance responded. And what you need to know is JD Vance is Catholic, his wife Usha is Hindu, and the student wanted to know, how do you guys make that work? You know, how do you raise your kids so that they don't think one religion is better than the other? How do you make your interfaith marriage work? And I think part of the premise of that question is, I've seen what you say about non-Christians. I've seen what you say about immigrants. Well, your wife is I think, first generation Indian, South Asian. I think Hindus are not Christians. So, like, I know what you do with public policy, but what do you do in your own home when it comes to this stuff? So let me play for you the first part of this clip, and we'll talk about it right after that.
What I want to ask is, you are married to a woman who is not Christian. In her Wikipedia, I mean, I just looked that up. I wanted to know what her faith was. I didn't know this before. But she still calls herself Hindu. You are raising three kids in interracial, cultural, racial, religious household. How are you maintaining, or how are you teaching your kids not to keep your religion ahead of their mother's religion? Or how are you teaching them that your kind, they're that kind who got here just few years or few decades ago is different or is better than your mom's kind who got here just a generation before?
Now, I thought that is an excellent question to ask him. And it's one that I don't think I've seen a lot of interviewers ask him before. But the reason that's a good question is JD Vance is very much a Christian nationalist. And if he doesn't call himself that, well, he allies himself with Christian nationalists. They're part and parcel of the Trump administration. He has spent his time in office propping up right-wing Christians who pretend that they are being persecuted, which is a lie. He has denigrated people who are not Christian. We've seen what people on the right have said about Zoran Mamdani. Why? Because he's Muslim and they don't like him. That's why. And we know JD Vance thinks Christians are better than non-Christians because everything he does points in that direction. So I like the question. What do you do at home? And at first, his answer was not that weird. Like, the best Steelman version of his response is that all couples who are from different faith backgrounds, you work through your differences together. You have shared values, even if you don't have shared religious views, and that helps a bit. He said he respected his wife respects him, etc. It didn't really sound like theology mattered to them all that much. But then he added a little more, and this is what people were really talking about. If you heard anyone talking about this speech, this is a slightly longer clip, but this is the part I really wanted to show you. Let's see what you think about this bit.
You asked a personal question about our interfaith household. And yes, my wife did not grow up Christian. I think it's fair to say that she grew up in a Hindu family, but not a particularly religious family in either direction. In fact, when I met my wife, we were both, I would consider myself an agnostic or an atheist, and that's what I think she would have considered herself as well. Everybody has to come to their own arrangement here. The way that we've come to our arrangement is she's my best friend. We talk to each other about this stuff. So we decided to raise our kids Christian. Our two oldest kids who go to school, they go to a Christian school. Our 8-year-old did his first communion about a year ago. That's the way that we have come to our arrangement. But thank you. My 8-year-old was also very proud of his first communion. Thank you, guys. I'll tell him that Old Miss wishes him the best. But I think everybody has to have this own conversation when you're in a marriage. I mean, it's true for friends of mine who are in Protestant and Catholic marriages, friends of mine who are in, atheist and Christian marriages. You just got to talk to the only advice I can give is you just got to talk to the person that God has put you with, and you've got to make those decisions as a family unit. For us, it works out. Now, most Sundays, Usha will come with me to church. As I've told her, and I've said publicly, and I'll say now in front of 10,000 of my closest friends, do I hope eventually that she is somehow moved by the same thing that I was moved in by church? Yeah, I honestly do wish that, because I believe in the Christian gospel, and I hope eventually my wife comes to see it the same way. But if she doesn't, then God says everybody has free will, and so that doesn't cause a problem for me. That's something you work out with your friends, with your family, with the person that you love. Again, one of the most important Christian principles is that you respect free will. Usha's closer to the priests who baptized me than maybe I am. They talk about this stuff. My attitude is you figure this stuff out as a family, and you trust in God to have a plan, and you try to follow it as best as you can, and that's what I try to do.
Okay. There's so much to unpack there. First of all, he said that when he was younger, he used to be agnostic or atheist. I believe that's very much in the vein of like Kirk Cameron, who has also said pretty much the same thing. He wasn't an atheist in the sense that he's like actively arguing that God doesn't exist. I think JD Vance says he's an atheist because he wasn't Christian. He never really thought about religion that much. He had other things on his mind. And his idea of, I didn't think about this stuff, that's what he thinks being an atheist was. I don't have the same definition. Not that big of a deal, but there you go. And also, he said he has friends who are in mixed faith marriages. That's not true. He does not have friends. So he's just lying. But okay, let's go to the substance of his answer, because there are gaping holes in some of the things he said there. Because even if neither he nor his wife were particularly religious when they met, which is entirely possible, both of them have very much leaned into their faith identities ever since they became public figures. Vance said they decided to, what did he say? Raise our kids Christian. Why? Why didn't you raise them Hindu? He didn't answer that. He also said, that's the way we have come to our arrangement, as if like, yeah, whatever I say goes. I'm the man, I'm the husband. So, that's how we compromised. We just do whatever I want. And I'm not sure that really answers the question there. And then he said he really hopes his wife converts. And the thing I wish, if they allowed follow-up questions, is, well, what are the chances you're going to convert? None. Of course he's not. No one expects like the Christian to convert. No one expects the husband in the mixed faith relationship to convert. So why does he think she's going to maybe change her mind? But there's no indication he's ever going to change his. And just because she has free will, JD Vance also ignored a different question, which is, if his wife is not a Christian, does he believe she's going to spend eternity in hell? Given his theology, the answer is yeah. He thinks his wife is going to hell. How does that not cause a problem for him? Like, if he just came out and said, look, I'm Catholic on paper, but let's be honest, I don't really think about it much. I don't care. Honestly, respect. That would make so much more sense, because if you just say you're Christian, but you're married to someone who's Jewish or someone who's Muslim or Hindu, and you're like, yeah, it doesn't cause us problems because, I don't know, neither of us really take our religions like that seriously. It's just something we grew up with. We like it. We're used to it. It's a cultural thing. Honestly, that makes plenty of sense. But he didn't say that, which means he really does believe his wife is going to hell, and he didn't account for that at all in their answers. Because he also said, I hope she becomes a Christian. I hope she becomes Catholic. But if she doesn't, meh, whatever. Like, I don't know, man. If you go to church, I was told she's a problem if she doesn't convert. So he didn't answer any of the relevant questions. He basically acted like all it boils down to is mutual respect, even though in their relationship, there is no mutual respect when it comes to religion because his religion takes priority in their family, and there's no indication from his answer that her religion ever gets taken seriously at all. Like, at what point in that story, in his response, did he say, these are the things we do because we also want to honor the Hindu tradition? Nothing. He didn't say anything like that. And keep in mind, the backdrop of all of this is that the Trump administration is terrorizing communities of color, not just criminals, just whatever brown people they find on the street, and making it very clear that white people, most of whom are Christian, will always get preferential treatment no matter what this country says about religious freedom. You can find the headline right now. They're trying to give white South Africans preferential like immigration treatment because, those are the good kind of immigrants. He said the same thing about Europe, places in Europe, things like that. Now, after he said all this, JD Vance got a lot of criticism, mostly online, basically for throwing his wife's religion under the bus or under the couch, if you will. And Vance predictably was like, how dare you insult my faith? Because he sees everything as a personal insult. And this is what he tweeted out at the time. Here we go. What a disgusting comment. He's referring to a comment that he threw his wife's faith under the bus. And it's hardly been the only one along these lines. He accuses the lady asking the question of being to his left, as if that matters. But here's, I'm going to scroll down let's look at number 2 here. Second, my Christian faith tells me the gospel is true and is good for human beings. My wife, ... is the most amazing blessing. That's fine. She's not a Christian and has no plans to convert. But like many people in an interfaith marriage or any interfaith relationship, I hope she may one day see things as I do. But don't ask me follow-up questions about it because it doesn't matter. Who cares if she doesn't? Theology doesn't matter. Regardless, I'll continue to love and support her. That's nice because she's my wife. If you're not married to JD Vance and you are Hindu or a woman or brown, you're screwed. If you're married to him, it's fine. Third, posts like this reek of anti-Christian bigotry. Oh my God, it's not bigotry to call him out on his dumb answer. Yes, Christians have beliefs, and yes, those beliefs have many consequences. One of which is that we want to share them with other people. That is a completely normal thing, and anyone who's telling you otherwise has an agenda. My dude, we all know Christian beliefs come with consequences. We are living under the weight of them right now, but it's not bigotry to call out how bad his answer was because he really does not respect his wife, and that's what was clear. It's not bigoted to ask a leader in a racist, fascist administration how specifically he respects his brown wife's non-Christian faith. Like I said, he could have just said they're not really religious. They just play religious on TV, but you can't do that because that'll infuriate your white evangelical base. He also could have said, I respect my wife's beliefs, so my kids learn both of our beliefs. Yeah, they go to Catholic church sometimes, but also we send them to a Hindu temple so they can learn about that too, and the kids will get to decide what they believe when they're older. No, he didn't say that because that would actually be respectful. So he tried to have it both ways. He pleased nobody. One of the things that made me laugh, there is a group called the Hindu American Foundation, which I get annoyed by because Sarah Huckabee Sanders might say, Happy Diwali. And they'll be like, this is the greatest thing ever. What a good governor for honoring our tradition. And it's like, she's not a good person. You don't have to give her credit for that one. But they routinely praise Republicans for doing the bare minimum if they mention something Hindu. Well, even the Hindu American Foundation was like, we don't like JD Vance's answer. Check this out. With respect, JD Vance, you don't need to give him respect. If your wife encouraged you to re-engage with your faith, why not reciprocate that and engage with Hinduism too? If you did, you may well learn that Hinduism doesn't share the need to wish your spouse comes around to see things as you do. That is true. Hinduism is not an evangelical type of religion. We do not seek to convert anyone. And then, this is important. There is also a history of Christians denigrating Hindus, attempting to convert Hindus through sometimes unethical means. In recent months, we've seen an outpouring of anti-Hindu sentiment online, often coming from explicitly Christian sources. Yeah, Republicans are effing racist. Both of these underpin the sentiment that your statements regarding your wife's religious heritage are reflective of a belief that there is only one true path to salvation, a concept Hinduism simply doesn't have, and that path is through Christ. Damn. You're the VP. It's more than reasonable and well within precedent for a Christian public figure such as yourself to acknowledge the positive impact of Hinduism on Hindus and the rights of Hinduism to practice. Not bad, Hindu American Foundation. I appreciate that. I also wanted to show you one other thing here. This is from the New York Times. They pointed out in a June interview on Meghan McCain's podcast, Mrs. Vance said that while the children went to Catholic school, they could choose whether they wanted to be baptized. Look at what she says about how they're raising their kids. The kids know that I'm not Catholic, and they have plenty of access to the Hindu tradition from books that we give them. What does that even mean? I promise you, if you give little kids books about Hinduism, those are not getting read. So that doesn't help. She says they have access to the Hindu tradition, to things that we show them. What do you show them? Did you maybe watch a Bollywood movie once? Is that what you're talking about? That doesn't count. To the visit recently to India and some of the religious elements of that visit. So it's part of their lives. And they know that many practicing Hindus as a part of their lives in their own family. Listen, if you take a trip to India and you pretend like, hey, we did some religious stuff during that visit. Listen, if you visit India and you go to a temple, that's like visiting Europe and going to a castle. It doesn't make you part of the monarchy. You're just a tourist. Doesn't mean anything. Having access to books doesn't mean kids are reading them. And having Indian parents or relatives doesn't really change that either. So even when Usha Vance is talking, she is downplaying elements of her faith and ceding ground to JD Vance's Catholicism. I don't know. I would have less of a problem if they just admitted religion is not that big of a deal in our family, but we have a zealot, rabid, frothing at the mouth voter base we have to appease. So let's just pretend we're super religious. It's really ironic because Donald Trump, no matter what label he uses to lie with, and no matter what he says in any speech, no one would seriously argue he's religious. And no one's asking Melania Trump about her faith because she doesn't have any thoughts worth listening to. In case you're wondering, she's also Catholic. I had to look that one up because who knew? I asked my friend Dale McGowan, who wrote this book that's right behind me, Atheism for Dummies. He also wrote a book once called In Faith and in Doubt, which was all about interreligious relationships between like atheists and people of faith. And like, how do you make it work? And what are the obstacles? So the book is great, In Faith and in Doubt. I asked him, what did you make of JD Vance's comments about this? You want to know what he told me? He said, it certainly violates the foundational requirement of a successful interfaith marriage and does so with total disrespect for the other partner. And he was referring specifically to the wish that she would eventually convert. If you seriously believe that, your marriage is going to be on the rocks, according to Dale. And the question of how to make Catholic Hindu marriages work is also a sore subject for a lot of Indians, not Usha Vance, but other Indians, given how Christians have a long history of colonizing and converting people in brown countries. I don't know if you've also saw this, but over the past couple of weeks, while Vivek Ramaswamy is running for governor of Ohio, and he's Hindu, and I think Kash Patel, who's the FBI director, is also Hindu, they've been getting a lot of racist comments from their own Republican base because their Republican base does not see them as truly American. And they're spewing a lot of hate their way. And like, I don't like either of those two guys, but there are plenty of good reasons to criticize them that have nothing to do with their religion. But it is interesting to see what sort of base JD Vance is trying to cultivate here. I also wanted to show you, there was an article in Religion News Service, the Wire service, from Khyati Joshi, who is Hindu and married to, I believe, an Episcopalian, but she wrote something about what JD Vance's comments meant to her. When a sitting vice president makes this kind of statement at a political rally, that private conviction is amplified through the power of public office. It reverberates through a culture already grappling with whether Christianity alone defines morality, patriotism, and family values. It reinforces an old and persistent story about belonging in America. That wholeness, even love itself, ultimately depends on coming to Christ. Americans who are Hindu, Jewish, Sikh, Buddhist, and Muslim will hear Vance's hope that his wife converts as a public reminder that only one faith is really American. And I think that's another aspect of JD Vance's comments that is worth talking about when it comes to his wife, who on paper appears to be different from him in some very important ways. He stressed how they work through their differences. They have mutual respect. They have shared goals, like, raising our kids and helping Trump defeat democracy. But think about that. He says, I have respect for my wife. We have differences, but we work through them. We're partners. We have a shared goal. Well, how does JD Vance act toward Democrats who also have a goal of making our country better? You would think, on paper, right? When it comes to Democrats, JD Vance has no interest in working through anything with them. He lies about them. He demonizes them. He treats them as if they are not real Americans. That's why his answer also rings hollow. We know what he's like because we see what he's done. None of it's making him look good. But he wants everyone to believe that when he's behind closed doors at home, he's a completely different, thoughtful, respectful individual. Do you buy that? I don't. Like, this is a public confession of his religious hierarchy. It's his religion, then other kinds of Christians, then everyone else. That's how it goes. So to hope that your wife converts, that's not about affection or respect. That is a desire to dominate her. How much respect can you really have for a partner who you still think, years into your marriage, is lacking something that is vital to you? That matters only because he's the vice president. Not just because he's the vice president, because his attitude mirrors the Christian nationalism we see in his party. He's dismissing Hinduism as something his wife will eventually see through, right? Because it wouldn't be okay if she just stuck with it. She has to break free from it. And that tells you what he thinks about other Americans as well. The fact that his arrangement involves his children being raised as Christians, that's not a compromise. That's just reinforcing his hierarchy. He doesn't think Hindus are people of equal but different faith. He sees it as some cultural artifact that, his wife will eventually discard. And if she doesn't, well, their kids aren't going to be joining it anytime soon. That's how this administration treats everyone who's not one of their kind. It is funny that even in the supposed sanctity of his own marriage, JD Vance cannot seem to imagine a union that doesn't revolve around him and his beliefs. I'll stop there for now. What questions we got here? Thank you for becoming a YouTube member. I appreciate that. He probably is still an atheist. That's all part of their power charade. Hey now, do not put him in our category. He is very much he is very much one of those like apathetic, well, call him an apatheist. He doesn't care, but he knows what's good for him politically. I would not be surprised. I mean, do you remember like Inauguration Day, Trump and Vance, like earlier this year, they sat at, I think, an Episcopal church, and the lady who was the minister that day, she basically reamed into them, telling them to open their hearts and not be assholes. And they look so uncomfortable because, one, she was criticizing them and they're not used to that. And two, they're inside of a church and they are not comfortable in those situations unless someone is sucking up to them publicly. So it doesn't make him an atheist. I mean, listen, if he is, but I think he just doesn't care. And if he doesn't care, that's fine. I wish he would tell the truth about that. Conflating meh unaffiliated with atheist. Yeah, I think he is meh unaffiliated. different category. I wish the researchers, I wish the people who did surveys would use that one. That seems to encapsulate a lot of Americans. I may have missed it, but how long have they been married? I could be wrong here. I'm guessing. I think it's like in the 10-year, maybe a little more than that mark, because they have 3 kids who are around that age. So something like that. I love and respect her. I just wish she would change all of her beliefs to mine. Yeah, I mean, you get it. It sounds weird. That's not what you say about someone you actually love and respect. You can have disagreements, but again, when it comes to something that JD Vance wants us to believe is a core part of his identity, there are some gaps that you just cannot cross. You can't build a bridge around them, and I wish he would just admit that. As a family, aka he decides for everyone or they get divorced. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we decide everything as a family and it happens to be whatever I want. I don't buy Vance being sincere about anything. Yeah, me neither. I saw him, I don't know if it was at the University of Mississippi thing, but he gave a speech recently and you can just tell the lack of charisma. And I don't even mean that in a mean way. I mean, if Trump is not on the ballot, if you think JD Vance is going to pick up the MAGA torch and carry it onward, no, he's not. The people who come out to support Trump are not going to come out and support Vance the same way. He doesn't have whatever it is you want to say Trump has, which he does. I mean, it works for him, but Vance doesn't have it.